If I had to pick one word to describe the ending of Attack on Titan, the word I'd use is controversial. Since Attack on Titan's manga finished in April of 2021, there has been a very mixed bag of reactions to its finale. The final season, however, has left us off with what looks to be another battle getting ready to take place. With anime fans all over the world at the edges of their seats, another to be continued screen appears and we're forced to wait until 2022 to see the rest play out. Now I must preface that this is not going to be a video about me picking a side and telling the internet why I loved or hated the ending. In fact, this isn't even meant to be a review. Rather, think of this as an overview of what to expect for the anime and an insight into what manga readers are talking about. We'll be going over things up to episode 16 of the final season, so if you don't want to get spoiled, I recommend you catch up with the anime first. Other than that, this video will be free of manga spoilers past the point in which the anime leaves off. This is the first episode of... Before we can even start talking about anything, it's very important that you know what's left to adapt in the number sense. The final season leaves off on manga chapter 116. There are 139 total chapters of AOT, leaving 22 left to adapt. Chapter 139 has two different versions. There is the 51-page chapter released in Bisatsu Shonen Magazine's April 2021 publication, and there is the extended ending version released with AOT's 34th volume. The extended ending mostly functions like a post-credit scene or epilogue, and it added 8 pages to the already existing 51. As you can imagine, it's also the root of more controversy. When Attack on Titan first began, it started as a kind of military revenge story with teenagers at the forefront. As the seasons progressed, we found that everything was much larger than we originally thought, and everything we saw was for a reason. Crumbs and clues were strategically sprinkled throughout the plot, building to an eventual payoff and finally learning about the secrets of the basement. The final season has followed a similar stride, except this time it's not a basement in question. This time, it's the main character. With him becoming the biggest question mark in the anime's plot, we can't help but wonder, why is Eren doing what he is doing? We know he has enemies, but at the same time he understands why they exist. He told all his friends that he wants them to live long, happy lives, but a little while later he abandons them and puts them in harm's way. Why? We know Zeke pitched a 3-point plan to utilize the founder to deter attacks while rebuilding Eldia, and we also know that Eren was starkly against this. However, just as Stone skips down the timeline, Hobo Eren is all of a sudden on board with Zeke. Why? Well, even though that's what Zeke was saying, that's not what he really wanted, right? We assume that Zeke's secret euthanization plan was the reason Eren changed his mind. However, that still doesn't explain why he became Hobo Eren in the first place. When Hanji visits Eren in jail, he says, why would he say this? Eren's idea of freedom changes throughout the course of the series. In the beginning, we see freedom through the eyes of Kid Eren and Kid Armin as they have romanticized freedom as this idea of going beyond the walls and seeing the world. This view changes, ultimately bringing us to the end of Season 3, where the two, now some years older, finally see the ocean. However, while Armin is elated to see the ocean, Eren takes a different stance. Though he is now able to experience the things he once read about in books as a child, his older self is not satisfied. His new idea of freedom does not match the one he once resigned to as a kid. Fast forward to Season 4, and Man-Bun Eren is now saying that he's free, leaving us to assume he's past whatever obstacles to freedom he had at this moment. Like the quote from The Lion King.
When the world turns its back on you, you turn your back on the world.
In a weird way, that's kind of like Eren. He's done what he's done because there's no other way, right? Yeah, he's turned his back on the world. He's lashed out at Hanji asking rhetorical questions because Eren is dealing in absolutes now. He's a martyr in the eyes of the Jaegerists because he's the devil they need, and he's doing it all in the name of vengeance and freedom, right? It all makes too much sense, but there's still a discrepancy in the plot. Why did he go rogue and betray the group when this was him just a while earlier? We're left to do a lot of assuming because there's still pieces missing in the plot. We assume that Eren does what he does because of the life he's had. He yearned to go beyond the walls, and when he learned the truth of the world, he realized that the walls were the least of his concerns. It all snowballs to him becoming this guy. That's as much as we know right now, but there's still a few whys that need to be answered. And it's with the answer to these whys that we can find the root of our controversy. Many of the comments critical of the end find themselves talking about chapter 139 specifically and how it plays out. The biggest reason why people didn't like the end is because they feel as if it wasted the story that comes before it. Now that's pretty vague, but there's a bit more. People feel like those whys that I was talking about earlier are not answered in a way that satisfies the plot, and they also feel as if some of them are not answered at all. But hold on, let me tell you about the other camp. For those that view the end in a favorable light, they feel like the whys are answered when you look back and recontextualize the series with the ending in mind. To them, the ending doesn't waste the story, it reframes and adds to it. They believe it's much more of a poetic and realistic end than it is one that plays to hype and fanfare. Oh yeah, and about that extended ending / epilogue post-credit I mentioned earlier. It's controversial because people feel as if it changes the impact of AOT's original magazine ending. So in a pinch, just know that the manga fandom is a mixed bag on its final chapter. Depending on the side of the internet you're on, you're bound to see varying takes on the ending. To further explain this divide, I'll add a few of my own personal observations. Now, I want to make clear that I'm not about to use the "your headcanon ruined the ending for you" point that people are using to explain away the disdain, but after having a long while to sit on the end and analyze the series and fandom, it's almost like there's a narrative fork in the road leading to a different feeling about the finale. I believe the split in the road reveals itself much earlier than chapter 139 and instead starts where the final season part 2 will pick up. As I was mentioning earlier, Attack on Titan first started off as a military revenge story with teens. It was Eren versus the Titans. Season 4 has transformed it into Eren versus the world. Titans aren't even the biggest threat in the series anymore. It's a war of politics and conflicting ideologies, particularly the idea that Eldians are subjects of the devil and that they should all be cast from the world. Despite the story development, I think it's very important for Anime-Onlies to know it's not as clean-cut as they might think it is. The final season part 2 will deepen the world even more than we know it, and it introduces our characters to a new set of circumstances that takes it beyond Eren versus the world. It becomes Eren versus something else not really tangible. As a theme like freedom has morphed over the course of Attack on Titan's anime run, other themes also take on new meanings, and I believe it's this last thematic evolution that people are finding problems with. I'll explain this more in the next section, but for now let's look a bit more into that narrative fork in the road. Allow me to use Shinji from Evangelion as my example. For the majority of the original series, his character development is actually a character regression. Many see that and say, Eva has garbage writing and Shinji makes for a weak protagonist, but there's also many who understand his character regression as an insight into the messed up world of Eva and Hideaki Anno's mental state. The thing is, nobody's wrong to make their case about Shinji because there's various lines and scenes that prove both arguments. We all know Shinji as this weak kid, but how we digest that fact is what makes the difference. For AOT's case, it's a similar situation with how people are looking at the same thing, but taking it in differently. For those on the dislike side, they say that Isayama ruined his character writing and got sloppy in the end, while others cite those very same plot elements to prove it was always going to the place it ended. There's already a few things animated that can be seen with this fork in the road interpretation. I'll use an example from the restaurant scene in Season 4. What are we to gather from Eren's character at this moment? He's at Nicolo's restaurant to converse with Armin and Mikasa. He says that he's always hated Mikasa, beats up Armin, and proclaims himself to be free. You can look at this scene in one of two ways. Choice A is, Eren has become an ideological maniac, and he acts this way because of what he's been through. Or choice B, he's saying and doing these things to get at something else we don't know about yet. If there's anything we've learned from AOT's previous seasons, always make sure to question what is being said, how it's being said, and what is being shown. So I'll leave this section off with a question. What does Eren's expression tell you from this frame? Are these the eyes of vengeance and rage, hopelessness and sorrow, or is the dude just giga chatting so hard that his face looks like this? Stepping away from story elements and fandom study, let's talk about something that is also very important for Anime-Onlies to know. Attack on Titan's final 22 chapters don't really shy away from the action, and if there's any time for the anime to shine, this episode block is when. Of course, we all know that the anime studio MAPPA will be finishing out the series as they were the ones in charge of the first half of the final season. They're also responsible for a few other series that have made waves in the community, such as Jujutsu Kaisen, Kakegurui, and Dorohedoro to name a few. For the case of AOT, however, it's going to have to be more than just a faithful adaptation. There's a variety of intense and emotional moments that come with these chapters, and for Isayama's vision to come to life, everything needs to come together in a way that feels absolute, a quality some felt was missing from the manga. In order for this to work, they'll need to nail down certain character beats so things aren't left up for assumption. I don't think they can skate through just by adding voices, music, and motion to the manga panels. We need to feel the hopelessness, the tragedy, and the gut punches at max potential for everything to work. What I'm about to say next may be something that manga readers disagree with, but I think the public opinion on the anime's end will be more favorable than that of the mangas. Bringing the story to life is going to be the most critical aspect of the final episodes. If they can hit all the necessary beats, I think they could be on top of something still somewhat controversial, but more widely accepted as the ending. I say this because there's certain elements in Attack on Titan's last 22 chapters that could come across as more genuine and meaningful in animated form. But as I was mentioning in the earlier section, a thematic evolution is what has caused all of the back and forth. I believe that if the anime can more clearly define the themes and motivations in play, people will be able to find peace in its animated finale. This is something I feel the manga didn't do enough of, and it caused that split in comprehension I was talking about. Direction is going to be the most critical part to AOT's final episodes. And knowing what has been done in the past seasons, I think we're in safe hands. You can trash me next year if that's not true. But the key to a successful adaptation lies with the impactful depiction of AOT's thematic evolution. I just don't think the manga presented it under the best lighting, and that's why there's such a strong dislike from some. But with the anime, I think it's possible. With the anime, I think we can walk away with the baggage we were meant to carry. Understandably, some will still dislike it and some won't enjoy it at all for the reasons I just mentioned. But I don't exactly think Isayama wrote this ending to send everyone off with a smile and high five. It's supposed to call attention to the much larger themes of freedom, fate, and destiny with a hint of human nature in it. This is the road I think Isayama was trying to lead us down, but whether he was constrained by panels on paper or pressure from higher ups, there's still a quite sizable portion of the fandom that didn't resonate with the intent. I'm not saying the anime will save Attack on Titan from the depths of despair, because I don't believe it was ever there, but I think if the anime is to go down as one of the greatest ever, the final season part 2 needs to drive home and ingrain its themes deeper than the manga did. We need to feel the highest highs and the lowest lows. When it burns, it needs to scorch, and when it ends, we need to be able to put AOT to rest. There's this cultural phrase used in Japan that is typically associated with Japanese literature. This phrase is known as mono no aware. Translated as the pathos of things, mono no aware is meant to describe the feeling of impermanence and the sad but beautiful nature that coincides with it. This is something that Japanese literature has utilized for generations, and of course, it can also be seen in anime and manga. For stories that utilize mono no aware, instead of looking at things with a simple beginning and end, these two concepts become intertwined, giving the other meaning. It's because the cherry blossoms won't last forever that they are beautiful to see when in season. Think wistfulness and the gentle sadness of life. Just like Kaori's letter to Arima and the train that passes in 5 centimeters per second. It's the transience of life, but in the case of AOT, it's the transience of a story. Attack on Titan ends on the minor keys of a piano, similar to the likes of the end of Evangelion or the final lines of a Satoshi Kon film. Now, the end of AOT doesn't share much in common with either Eva or Kon films in terms of plot, but that feeling of watching the credits roll and not knowing how to feel will be the same. You might not even know why you feel what you feel, but for some reason, you just do. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, well, that's for you to decide. What began on that day has now cultivated itself into a story loved by many all around the world. We often speak of pop culture franchises that go on to become classics. Take your pick, there's an abundance of them nowadays, but there's a select few that we can mark as having cultural events. For a lot of anime fans, the ending of Attack on Titan will be the cultural event. It's not something that will have you out of your seat throwing roses on the stage as our characters bow out. Instead, it's an end that will make you sit back into your seat, take a deep breath, and say, it's over. There's this song from the Attack on Titan soundtrack called Vogelum Kfig that I think describes the feeling of the end perfectly. The first time we hear it is at the end of episode 1 when Carla gets eaten. Its lyrics encompass ideas of resisting fate and moving on, and when you translate the title Vogelum Kfig to English, it means bird in a cage. So I ask you, what is the bird and what is the cage? Legendary. If I had to pick one word to describe Attack on Titan, the word I'd use is legendary. The sun is setting on a series that will not only go down in anime history, but pop culture history as a titan that defined a generation. A generation only lived once, but a time we have the opportunity to experience. A time when we got to see pop culture rumble.
Yeah.